dangerous things that are happening in this country, forget about all the other stuff that you're talking about, there is nothing more dangerous than 600 million teenagers from the age of 18 and young adults till the age of 24 who have no jobs, their health is not steady, and they have no future or understanding of what their future is, because that is what causes civil wars in every country. Go back into history, is that percentage of 18 to 24. The larger the percentage of people falls into that, the more likely of civil wars, whether it's in Africa, Europe, or any other place. So we have a responsibility, all of you who are citizens of this country and those of us who are business leaders, saying, how do you fix this? Because this is going to spill over. Because you see, in a place like India or a place like Malaysia or in Africa, children and people who are in rural areas are going to have access to the internet before they have access to clean electricity, clean water, and education and healthcare. And this is what we have to fix. So when you look at the shrinking, and by the way, about a month ago, the mayor of Amsterdam brought his entire leadership team to India, to Bangalore, and spent 5 days with me and with our team. And the reason, he said, is my country is getting older. Amsterdam is the knowledge capital of Europe, because that's where the internet and the brokerage and all the financial stuff goes through it. He said, but my city is increasingly becoming immigrant population. 20%, 25%, Rotterdam is already majority, is Muslims from Northern Africa. And they're already having a two-half state. Saying, this is dangerous. What do we do, and what can we do from India that we can adopt and work together? So shrinking. And then you look at hypergrowth, and you look at the list of the countries there. Those are the hypergrowth countries. So the world is going to be made up of people increasingly from those countries, which means this is what we have to fix from a global solution point of view. Affordable education, affordable healthcare, affordable culture. Because culture is what humanizes people. Books, songs. By the way, when 20% of the world's population of teenagers, 20% of the world's teenagers are in India, by definition, India should be driving the culture of the world. It's already happening with music and with food and some of the others. But the next Google, the next Facebook, the next Yahoo should come out of India. But it is not deterministic that it should come out of India. And this, and therein lies the race against time and what we're trying to do. That's why I said it is not a highfalutin, holding hands, singing kumbaya version of saying that we have to transform the world. We better transform the world, or there is nothing for us to live in. And the time's running out on many of us. So, here are some of the facts. In emerging countries, 700 million people are going to move from rural areas into cities. 700 million. In India, it's going to go from 310 million people cities to 575 million people in the next 20 years. Has anybody gone to Bangalore, Bombay, Delhi lately? You can't take 10 more people. Forget about 10 million. And if you go there, it is scary to see these high-rise buildings and all the water is coming from bore wells. Just think about the implication of living in a 30-floor building with bore wells offering you the water. Do you need anything else to create stress in the system in 5, 10, 15 years? So the question that says is, you got to build a city differently. India needs 200 new cities. China is going to build 350 new cities for 1 million and more in the next 15 years. What took 150 years worldwide, historically, we have to do it now in 20, 30 years. Build a new city with economy, with social structure, and with an environmental structure. You got 30 years to build a city. There's a city being built in Sydney called Barangaroo, so we are involved in that. When I went there and worked with the Lord Mayor of Sydney, he said, Anil, this is a 15-year project, and we don't build cities in 15 years. We take hundreds of years to build a city, but this is a 15-year, it's a public-private partnership, and they have penalties if they don't build the city in 15 years. You better work with Lend-Lease and figure this out. Do you know what that penalty now is? 8 years. build a city in 8 years, or a $14 billion company has got a penalty that can make it a bankrupt company. 8 years. In Australia, they can do it. Try imagine building a city here in 8 years that is environmentally sound. In China. So 700 million, this is not a trivial point, but the point that I want to ask you is this. Do you think I went to Amethi and Raebareli, and I sat in on villages. And some of you have gone to that part of the world, and you know this. For me, it was a very revealing thing, going from one village, and the IAS officer who took me there, asking questions, to 70 women. And he said half of the women had never unfolded their face in the veil for the first 60 years of their life. Ever. They're doing it for the first time. And he said something very interesting. The Rajput women are enslaved by the culture, and the lower ones are enslaved by the poverty, was his exact words. But I was talking to them, and I asked them in Hindi. My Hindi is terrible. It's Bombay Hindi. Those of you know what Bombay Hindi is. Apun ko malum hai. Okay? So this is the Hindi that I was asking them, and they were responding to me in Hindi. I got about 70% I understood. Then I went to the next village, which is about a 30-minute drive, and again in the same Amethi district, and I understood about 50% of what they were saying. By the time I went to the third and the fourth, I did not understand a word of what they were saying. They were talking the language that Amitabh Bachchan uses in those movies, you know, that Hindi that I'm like, I don't know what they're saying. And this is the same district. And then I said, imagine managing a district like that. Those are metaphors of the challenge. So the point is, a person in Amethi or somebody in Raipur or somebody else, they don't leave a village and go to the city because they want to leave their family behind. You leave rural areas, whether it is in Malaysia, or whether it is in the UK, or whether it is in the US, you leave the rural areas for lack of jobs, lack of healthcare, lack of education, and there's a lack of urban services. So what we have to think is, can we use and do something to take urban services into rural areas so there's less likelihood that they have to pick up and move? You can't answer the question saying, how many more cities can I build? Because you're asking the wrong fundamental question. You ask the problem, why do you need more cities? It's because of lack of urban services in rural areas. So how can we fix that? If you look at the US, you look at Europe and everywhere else, over 60% of all new buildings are in the developing countries. But in the developed countries, less than 3% of the buildings are LEED certified. Less than 3% of the buildings are environmentally sound. So you have to fix both problems. That is what smart connected communities are. How do you build a city in 10 years that is economically, socially, environmentally sound? And how do you transform Brussels and London? I'm just going to take one example of London, and I'll come back to a couple of the other points. But before I do London, I want to talk about something else. I talked about India. Do you know how many pediatric surgeons are there in Tanzania? Tanzania, a lot of Indians went there. Remember in the historical past, that was the place before Middle East. They went to Tanzania. Do you know how many pediatric surgeons are there in Tanzania? 0. Not one pediatric surgeon in the whole country that has an exploding growth rate. The first pediatric surgeon that was funded by an Israeli foundation is a 32-year-old kid who's coming back into Tanzania this year in October. And it's national news. You're laughing at that news. Let me give you one other fact. One of the most important news that came out of Somalia, Mogadishu, 4 months ago, was that the first dry cleaner after 28 years was opened in Mogadishu. That was global head news. Now you may say, that means they got nothing else to report on? But think about what it means. In a country that had civil war for 30 years, the opening of a dry cleaner means something is becoming sane. And people are talking about something that is so boring as something big. That is the world that we are in. So in that context, you take a place like London. I just came back from London, from the London Olympics. We are involved in that. Now you may think about London, and many of you will go to London and maybe work in London. Many of you have gone to London. If you take London out and call it a GDP, it's the 5th largest GDP in the world. But you go from Westminster, which is the seat of UK, Get on the train from Westminster and go to Stratford, which is where the Olympic Village was. There are 10 subway stops. At each stop, the life expectancy of the neighborhood goes down by 1 year. So the difference in the life expectancy of somebody living in Stratford versus living in Westminster of London is 10 years. The unemployment rate of East London, which is the size of New York, is 48.7%. This is UK we are talking about. And that part of London has been in the bottom 10% of the helplessness index of UK for the last 110 years. In other words, London needs all the things that we're talking about in India or we're talking about in Africa. Paris needs that. Amsterdam needs it. So this thing that I'm talking about here is, as you sit in India, as you think about the future of India business or political context, we need challenges and solutions here in India, here in Malaysia, here in Brazil, but you need them also in UK, and you need them in the US, and you need them in Japan. And this and therein is your future and your global world. For us in the technology world, we're saying we need things that allows you to create a digital infrastructure. And that is where the growth market is today. Cloud computing. How do you offer computing capabilities in the cloud so the cost structures are lower so you can offer things differently? How do you create a network so you can offer services in an authenticated manner? And that is what we do. So I want to take a few minutes talking about how the internet is no longer about the information. And I'll give you some simple example. How many in this room have used the expression, I'm going to go to the internet and I'll get that information? How many of you say, let's go to the internet? Have you gone to the internet? Why do you need to go to the internet? Why can't the internet come to you? How many of you said, I got to go to school? I got to go to the hospital. I got to go to the office. I got to go to the store. Our lives are physically bound and time bound. And that creates a mental model that creates different sets of solutions. You unbound the time space and you unbound the space, physical space, and you can rethink how information can come to you in any device, any format, and that is what the genius of Steve Jobs was. Steve Jobs was not a technologist. What he did was he humanized technology by bringing in anthropology and sociology to the field of technology. Steve Jobs' genius was not on what technology is needed. His genius was what do you take out of it and don't need, like a screw on the back of an iPad. Or the fact you don't need a disk drive, which is contrary to every basic principle of a computer design. So the whole point that I want to make up here is that this internet, what we call the network, is no longer about the information. It's about the business models that you put on top of it, and you have to rethink how will logistics and milk dairy transform the fact that the people who are milk producers can go from 20 cents on a dollar to a 60 cents on a dollar as they are with agriculture in India. So healthcare has to transform. Sports has to transform. So I want you to think about this. Imagine if, so any business that you go in, when I deal with CEOs, I used to ask them a simple question. I ask myself the simple question. And I ask everybody who's older than 30 this question. If you were starting out today, would you be in this business? If you were starting your career today, would you choose the particular company or the particular sector or the particular business? If you are a company, would you have these products and these categories even though you have a lot of business from that? And if you hesitate to answer that or your answer is no, then the second question is, what are you doing to change the answer? Because the role of a leader is to change that answer and not to do that. So I'm going to ask you a question. Imagine if you had unlimited computing at a reasonable price. Imagine if you had unlimited storage at a reasonable price. Imagine if everything was connected to everything. Would you do healthcare the same way? Would you do education the same way? Would you run the government the same way? Would you run a village the same way? Would you run your life the same way? Now, till recently the answer was, well, I don't have to worry about it because computing is not reasonable. So I'm going to give you some statistics here. Just since 1992 to 2008, this is the price of a MIP. It's gone down from $222 to 27 cents, and by 2012, which is where we live in, it is already into single digits in pennies. Storage. 1 gigabyte was $569 a gigabyte. It is now 13 cents in 16 or 18 years. It's down to almost pennies today. By the way, just to put this in perspective, because you know, you're not as old as I am, this is what a 5 meg drive looked like in 1956. This presentation is 25 meg. So you would have had 5 of them lined up on the corner in order for me to make this presentation. By the way, 1 gigabyte would have cost you $10 million in 1956. And 1 gigabyte today is that. And it's 8 cents. And now when they give it to you, you're like, oh, only one, I don't want it. My daughter doesn't accept anything less than 16 megabyte drives. Or 16 gigabytes, sorry, not megabyte, 16 gigabyte. So that's what it is. And by the way, if you took every recorded music in the world, ever recorded, it cost you less than $600 to digitally archive it. And actually it's much lower than $600. My point being is storage is free. Bandwidth, on the other hand, is a little bit expensive, especially in Asia. But even the bandwidth has come down from $1,000 to $130. So imagine if storage is cheap. Imagine if computing is cheap. Imagine if everything is connected to everything. Here's where we live. Today, there are more devices than people. By 2020, 50 billion smart objects will exist so that all of everything is going to be connected. We are there. It's called the Internet of Everything, or Internet of Things. That is the world we are in today, which means it's time for you to start thinking about how is healthcare going to be different, how is education going to be different, how is entertainment going to be different, how is music going to be different. So that's what I want to spend a few more minutes saying. Internet is going to be all around us, and it's going to be video. Just some more statistics, just to put the context, because we live in it, we forget about it. In 2011, last year, 20 families in the US loaded more data onto the internet, 20 families, than all of the internet data of 2008. In 2015, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 2.5 years from now, 2 years from now, in 1 second, 1 million minutes of video, high quality video will be loaded every second. 1 million seconds of high quality video. That's 2.5 years of video will be loaded every second on the net. By 2020, one family in the US will load onto the internet more data, more video, more traffic than all of the internet of 2008. One family. And 91% of all the internet will be video in the next 2 years. Which means, imagine if you got high resolution video, do you really need to drive to the doctor's office to talk to the doctor for 2 minutes? Do you really need to drive to the driver's place to get your driver's license issued, or for certification, when you can do authentication with biometrics online? I am not suggesting that you'll never leave your house. I always say, the world is not going to be different. It may not even look different, but the backbone is going to be different. That's what we are. By the way, exabytes, we're just getting used to gigabytes. I'm just beginning to understand what a petabyte is. And now we're already talking about an exabyte. By the way, a petabyte, 1 petabyte is 13 years of DVD quality pictures. 1 petabyte is 13 years of video. 1 exabyte is 1 million petabytes. Do the math. All I can tell you is there's going to be heavy-duty digital infrastructure that is video-based, and your world in 3 years will be dramatically different than your world today. And it's not going to be about loading how a dog is chasing a cat on YouTube. It is going to be about how the world is going to look different. This is a city being built out of scratch in Songdo, in Korea. And I'm very proud of it because CISCO has put the entire digital infrastructure there, and we are working with an American company that said, Ocean will build a city here. We reclaimed it, we built a city with golf courses, and we're building the entire city. Every home has a telepresence. By the way, those of you who don't know what a telepresence is or heard of it, when you get on YouTube, put down CISCO telepresence. Telepresence means you will look at somebody that looks like me, except he can walk up and just put his hand through me. And we do all our meetings inside CISCO using telepresence, where the quality of resolution is so high, it feels like Dr. Nataraj is sitting right in front of me. In fact, Shekhar Kapoor has started a company which we have invested in, and to do the due diligence, he and I, we were sitting in Bangalore with our people up in San Jose. It was an hour-and-a-half long meeting. At the end of the meeting, Shekhar Kapoor gets up and puts his hand out to shake hands with the other side. And then he looks at me and says, Anil, look, don't laugh at me. He says, anybody else you can laugh, but I'm a filmmaker. And the great movie is the one where you sit in the theater, you know you're in a theater, you're sitting next to strangers, you're sitting in a strange seat. You know that, but within 20 minutes you've forgotten it and you immersed yourself in the movie, and you don't realize you're in a theater. That's great movie. He said, this is great movie. It's not coincidental because Steven Spielberg helped us design that and his company. So we are already there, and that has transformed the place. So this is what is happening, and today what we're doing is real estate. The buildings are connected to the roads, and connected to the hospitals, and connected to the schools, so that the teachers can call in and physically talk to the parents. The parents, so just imagine, Singapore came to us and said, we had SARS, and we believe that these kinds of epidemics are going to continue in this global world. When we have SARS, our children are not going to school. Can you put in telepresence in all of the homes? We'll put a gigabyte line into everything. We want them to continue going to school and getting classroom education while they're sitting at home. And by the way, it is not Skype. This is high quality, authenticated teacher reviews. That is what we are building, saying, how do we do it so that we are doing them smart? So we have all these 8 cities. I won't go into that. So these are the projects that take me all over, whether it's waterfront, a new city being built outside of Russia called Skolkovo, a new city. I mean, there are 300 cities happening in China, obviously, in London, in Songdo, Lend-Lease, and in India, it's a Delhi-Mumbai corridor. So we are involved in Dholera, we are involved in Chandra, we are involved in a few others. India is building an entire Tokyo-Osaka corridor in India, and that is going to transform India, just like Tokyo-Osaka corridor transformed Japan. There's $90 billion invested by Japanese government into Delhi-Mumbai corridor. Now, put one perspective, India has been transforming itself with JNURM. JNURM's budget is $32 billion. What India needs today just for its roads, bridges, ports, airports is $1.2 trillion. The need is $1.2 trillion. The budgeted allocation is $32 billion. You can sit and do the math. It's not going to get there. Although Raja can probably cover the entire remainder. But I can say that here. Someone said there's press here, right? You took them out? Oh, okay, good. Every time I speak, the company gets very nervous because they're saying, Anil, please don't say something that's going to get in the press, and then I have to call people and explain. There's Samudaya. I just want to talk a little bit about, it's not about pretty stuff. In Karnataka, 2 years ago, one of the largest floods, and over 30% of the people lost their homes. Lots of deaths. So Chief Minister's office called me because I was heading up globalization and because I was the face. I get these interesting calls. Can you help us? Which means money. So we said, next day I said, I'll put $10 million in, but I'm not giving a single penny. What I will do is the money I will control. I will build 4,000 homes. I mean, CISCO will build 4,000 homes. We'll build 2 schools, 1 hospital. We'll network it completely, and we will offer high quality education, high quality medicine out of Bangalore. Those are what you're seeing. We have already given out 3,000, 27,000 volunteer hours by our CCIE engineers who would get on a train on a Saturday, Friday night, land there on a Saturday, work 2 days, teach, build these schools, build these buildings, come back. By the way, We are now doing 500 students a week are getting instructions in English and math by teachers out of Bangalore, volunteer students, volunteer employees from CISCO. We got over 1,000 patients being seen. By the way, you know, child absenteeism in rural areas is #1 reason why they're not going to school in poorer neighborhoods. Dysentery, diarrhea. To fix diarrhea and water problems in one village is 2 lakhs. That's it. Clean water, diarrhea goes away, they go to school, give them a meal, midday meal, they're healthy, they stay in school, and they can progress. It's that simple. So my point being is, we're already doing that. And then we gave the entire network to the government and said, build all the other places on that. Don't go rebuilding the way it used to be because you will have the same problems later. BSNL put in the 128, 512. All of this is on 512. It doesn't need high resolution. So education on a lower resolution with high quality because you can transform. That is what our researchers are doing. CISCO has gone from 1,000 people 5 years ago when we started our globalization headquarters. We chose India over Dubai, Singapore, China because of language, because of democracy, because of IP protection, because of locational advantages, and Bangalore because of the ecosystem. We are now at 10,000. We'll be 15,000 in the next 3 years. But what are they doing? They're building these kinds of things. How do you put everything into a box so that a child in the school somewhere can get it? We're also building a high-end stuff which is sold for $2 million. Trust us, we need that to pay for the other. By the way, it's not CSR. We don't do it as CSR. This is good business. But you need good models of business. So, let's dream a little. This is already there, where you're building a replacement kidney and printing it out of a laser printer. It's already where you created an artificial leaf that generates more oxygen and uses up more carbon dioxide. By the way, we're not moving into Jurassic Park neighborhood yet. Every time I do this, people are saying, oh God, we're going to have robots running around. We already have robots running around. We are doing high-quality surgery when the person is sitting somewhere else and running a system through a patient sitting somewhere else. We're already doing some of those things. We are also getting, and those of you who have seen the Google eyeglasses, you put on your glasses and you can literally get, now by the way, when you say that, you're like, oh, these are the people driving? But here's the thing, how many of you have heard of Lasik surgery? Do you know in Lasik surgery what they do? One eye is for long distance, one is for short distance, and they surgery. And most of us who wear glasses say, hell no, don't touch my glasses, man. Can you imagine doing the surgery so one eye can be for long distance and the other one for short distance? Within 8 hours, your eyes adjust and you're able to read and drive with Lasik surgery done. Your body adjusts to those things. And figuring that out is the new future. So this is where we are, and the question I ask always is this a new beginning or a false dawn? So I want to talk to you about one of my heroes, Thomas Edison. People always ask me, how do you work 60, 80, 90 hours a week? What keeps you going? Well, for one thing, what keeps me going are these interesting challenges. I meet smart people, so you have to keep going. Because you keep saying, I got another 30 years to live. My God, there are so many more smart people to meet. Now, the other thing that keeps me going is because I collect. I have distractions in my life other than family. Because sometimes you want distraction from the family too. I collect cylinder phonographs. Not the disc, but the ones from the 1880s to the 1910s. Thomas Edison invented the phonograph, as those of you know, music. He also invented the light bulb. But that is not his invention. His invention was he invented the electric grid, that today we call GE. So, Thomas Edison's first idea, this is like the thing that everybody wants, is that machine. This year was a good year for me because I found 2 of them. There are only 80 known to exist in the world. And I have one of the largest collections of Edison cylinder phonographs. But this is what was considered to be the way you listen to music in 1904. Now, if Edison was born again, and I'm in India, and you can say reincarnation, and people say, yeah, that makes sense. If Edison was reincarnated and he came to my house in Florida, and he saw my machines, He can say, that one, Anil, that scratch is mine. I scratched that because I have one of 3 known to exist. One is in Victoria and Albert Museum in the US, and one is in mine, and the third one is lost. And I'm glad it stays lost because there's only 2 that people can go touch. One is in my house in Florida. So he will look at the place and say, I touched that, I made that, I did a mistake on that one. He can look at all this stuff and I say, let me show you now how Ambika listens to music. Ambika being my daughter. This is how she listens to music today. I guarantee you this, there is 0 chance the man will ever connect the dots. He will say, this to that, what is that? 10 years ago, if somebody told you you're going to listen to music on your cell phone, you would have said, yeah, sure. Less than 10 years ago, you would have said, sure, yeah, fine. Today, who listens to anything but on cell phones? When I was the Sony fellow, Walkman was invented. And I remember the head of research and engineering who told me, Anil, if you ask the customers for Walkman, do you think they could have come up with the idea of Walkman? You never ask the customers what do you want because you're a lazy person. Because they cannot tell you what they want. They can only describe you their problems. Your job is to understand deeply their problems and then to offer them some solutions. What he did understand is people said, why do I have to sit and listen to music? Why can't I listen to music when I'm out in the streets? Why can't I listen to music when I'm running? Why can't I listen to music wherever I go? And that is how Walkman came into being. The company that came up with Walkman could never figure out iPod, and that's why it's gone down. Why is that? It's not like Sony went stupid. It's not like Sony suddenly said, we are number 1, let's go hire some stupid people now. They hired the same smart people and they went down to Samsung, which 20 years ago, 15 years ago, when I was hired as a Sony fellow, the CEO told me, Anil,